right. Thanks. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming. So I need a call to order and a roll call.
Weedman.
Here.
Braden. Here. LaCroix. Here. Miller. Here. Strack.
Here. All right, so we have a quorum for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, next up is I need your approval for the agenda.
So moved.
Second. Miller. Aye. Strack.
Aye.
Weedman.
Aye.
Braden. Aye. LaCroix.
Aye. Any public comments? Anybody sign up for Christie?
Nope.
Okay. Moving right along to board reports. Do you have anything?
I'm gonna step on Lynn's toes and steal her thunder. I'm sure she's gonna comment on this concert we went to last night.
Was.
Frederick fifth and sixth grade concert. Again, the takeaway there is just how proud we ought to be of our arts education in this district. Sixth grade band, I've said this every time that I've commented on the band concerts, is that, I'm an alumnus of these schools, and their sixth grade band is better than any eighth grade band I was ever part of, including kind of like a honors jazz band. It's just commendable how well they do, and I just wanted to make sure I said that. I'm really proud of the arts education and the music department in particular.
The only thing I have is last Friday, Stephen Mack and I sat down with Dr. Glickman and we gave her evaluation. I did forget to email it out to you, so I did it just before the meeting started, so you all have a copy of it in your emails. So everything went well with that, and just wanted to let you know that we delivered it on Friday. Up to you.
Okay, that was quick. Well, yes, I did attend the fantastic Frederick Band concert yesterday, and I agree completely with Jason. It was phenomenal, and about 50% of our Frederick students are in band, which is just remarkable. As well, just about every school has had some kind of a music program over the past week or week and a half, so this place is just busting with musicality right now, which is really exciting to see. Last Thursday night was the Jazz and Friends event that you've been hearing me talk about here. It was a very nicely attended event. We had community members from here, some community members from outside of our district as well, a number of students who commented that they felt well represented at the event. So I was really pleased, and we'll have some photos up to share pretty soon from that. A little bit later, when we get to our consent agenda, you will see a couple of retirements on that agenda, and I would be remiss if I didn't comment upon them publicly. Although we are very far away from the days where we actually say goodbye to these people in June. We have just learned that both of the administrators in our operations department will be retiring at the end of June, and that's Keith. You can give away. You don't have to get up. You can, but I know you don't want to. So Keith Grinnell and Marlo Richardson have both announced their retirements. We will be very sorry to see them go. Keith has been with our school district for 30 years. Marlo for, I believe it's 18, so 48 years of caring for our walls and our ground and our roofs and everything outside. It will be very hard to fill those positions, to fill that work. I will tell you that we're kind of at a regrouping place right now, so actually as soon as tomorrow, we're going to be having a meeting, a few of the central office administrators, and certainly including Marlo and Keith, to talk about the current division of responsibilities that they hold, so that we can make good decisions moving forward about how we want to post any kind of openings that we have in the operations department. And I will say I had it on good authority that they might retire before I started work, and I just feel like I need to say that because, you know, when an entire department walks out the door when there's a new superintendent, it doesn't look so good. So, we've been hearing those murmurings for a while. So we'll say goodbye. Well, I'll save the rest of it for the speech at the retirement event, but couldn't let the moment go by without commenting. And I'm going to hand it off next to Stephanie to talk about some work she's been doing over the past week.
All right. It's okay if I stand here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
So I have been contacted by both the principals, the new principals at Westgate as well as St. Gilbert's, because they, for the first time, have been applying for Title III funds. And so yesterday, a team of us went to Westlake and we screened 19 students. 18 of them qualified for services. So I'm working with Singh, who is our principal consultant, to figure out what writing for the grant and what programming will look like, because it will look a little bit different than what we have here. But we do know that they need 150 minutes a week of services. So we're just kind of going through all of that. It is part of our legal obligation through the grant that we offer services to non-public schools if they ask and qualify. So we've had the home language survey, went to all the students in Westlake, and then out of that number was where we got the 19. Okay, good. All right.
Thank you. I just want to add, thank you. I just want to add that, you know, the Westlake is, you know, we have a number of students who live in our boundaries that go to Westlake as well. You mentioned St. Gilbert's, right? So currently we don't have that many students who are St. Gilbert's who would qualify. However, there is a private school closing nearby, and I've just forgotten what private school that is. St. Joseph's is closing, and so we don't know where all of the students for St. Joseph's are going to go. And if students who currently go to St. Joseph's end up at St. Gilbert's, they may become students that we are responsible for screening as well. So all of this does potentially expand our staffing needs for ELL in the next year. Based on the screening Stephanie's already done, we're looking at an increase of at least a 0.5 ELL teacher in order to support all of those students, which we're legally obligated to do. If there are a lot of students coming through St. Gilbert's as well, it could be even more staffing. So we wanted everyone to be aware of that. At our next board meeting, Chris Woke is going to do his staffing presentation, and he'll have that folded in, but I wanted you to have heard about that at this time.
So part of that conversation as well is we might see an increase in our students, our bilingual students and our EL students at Avon, because we have already identified that a number of the students who attend St. Joseph's are in the Avon boundaries. So we may see an influx of students there as well. So Dr. Diaz has already been very proactive in trying to get as much information so that we can be ready and prepared for any and all students who come to us, which we'll be happy to include them into our programming, but it's just important that we know because some of our bilingual classrooms will have to watch enrollments a little bit. There's some tight guidelines that we have to follow about the number of students that can be in a bilingual classroom compared to monolingual classrooms. So just more information that we keep looking for.
And then, did you want to add something, Steph? No, okay. And then, of course, what's on everyone's mind? COVID-19. So just a little bit of an update as to where we are in our school district and the work that we've already done in that area. We have had a lot of communication in. Let me start with that. So I would say every about fourth email that I open up right now is about that. That doesn't mean that every fourth email is somebody asking a question. It is somebody in the community, somebody in Illinois, some in the United States sending out their communication in some way, shape, or form. Typically, it is all the same information, just packaged in a different way. As well, we have been communicating out to our community. So you've all seen, I've sent 2 emails to our parent community. The second one did not really have more information than the first one did. But we did feel that there were enough people with questions and concerns that we just wanted everyone to know we are continuing to look at this and think about it and work on it. So how are we working on it? Last week, we had a meeting of some administrators. That was some central office administrators, and Sue was there, and 2 of our principals came as well. We had one of our lower grade principals and one of our upper grade principals. And we just started the planning, talking about what do we need to know, what do we need to do, what would it look like if we had to close, all of that. And we just started, we kind of parsed out some responsibilities of things to continue researching. So that was last week. This week, Paul and Amanda on Friday are going to be meeting with our info specialists and our instructional coaches to work on a distance learning plan. And I want to clarify that we're using the term distance learning and not e-learning for a couple of reasons. One is a formalized e-learning plan is something that needs to go to the state. There's a very clear process. It has to, you need 30 days. First you need to bring it to the board, right? Then it needs 30 days to go to the state.
10-day notification for hearing at the board.
Yep.
And then the board can make a decision. And then we have to have 30 days to let parents know that this will be our intention to use an e-learning day if it's determined, before we can use an e-learning day.
So that's 40 days from now, and that feels like not a great idea, since nobody knows if we're ever going to need to close, and if so, how soon that would happen. So that's one reason why we're not calling it e-learning, because we're not, at this point, doing something formally with the state. The other reason is that the reason this school district made the decision back in the last couple of years when e-learning plans started coming through the state, the school district decided not to do that, knowing that we have some students who may not have internet access at home, and that our students in K2 don't have devices that they take home. So for those reasons, we're calling it a distance learning plan, and the concept is, what can we provide our parents and our students so that if we do have to close down for a little while, learning can continue. So that's what we're going to be working on. Do you want to add anything to that one?
Just that we're going to work on ideas for parents and students to do at home to continue school-like activities in case we have to eventually close for an extended period of time. We want to give parents and students some options of things that they could be doing at home. The difficulty, as we've talked about, if we're all sick or the kids are sick, it's not going to be an expectation that they're going to be doing work while they're sick. But we do think we should have some things available and on the website. So they're not going to be specific to the unit that we're working on right now, because we would have to do that every week for the next unit. So they're going to be more generic in mind.
Learning continuing. So, and then to wrap that piece up, next week we have another meeting scheduled, because we love to meet, with a few more administrators, and 2 parents will be joining us as well. So we are including some community members, and it will be at that point kind of an update as to this is where we are in the school district. We'll share the work that we've done so far on that plan. That plan may not be done yet, but we'll share and get some feedback and kind of have more opportunities to get questions answered. As well,
Preparedness.
yes, and that actually meets the requirements of one of our school board policies that has that we have a pandemic preparedness policy, and that requires a meeting like that. So in case anybody's scouring through your policies, you will know that we are meeting that policy. Also, lots of conversation with our operations department. So Keith and I have been talking a lot. Joe and I have been talking a lot about the computers and keeping them clean. I know that Keith has had meetings with our custodial staff. We are making some adjustments to our work at night with, I always say it wrong, RJB, in terms of, a different emphasis on the work that they're doing so that they have more time for surface cleaning. So those conversations are ongoing as well. So that's where we are right now with our COVID-19 planning, something no one thought we were going to be doing this year, but there it is.
Nobody heard of it until
Nobody heard of
January.
it, exactly. And lastly, just kind of off the cuff, although we don't typically talk with our people who are in our audience, I just need to say hello to a bunch of new, fresh faces. Hi. I'm going to make a guess that you're a high school class. Is that right? Yes? Okay, from which school?
Basic Central.
Central. And is it a civics class?
Yeah. AP government. Yeah.
Wonderful. And how many of you went to District 46?
Hooray.
Well, welcome back. We're really glad you're here. All right, that's it for the superintendent's report.
Okay. Next is the Community Engagement Committee report. We have anything? Okay, how about the Equity and Inclusion Committee? Makes that easier. Moving right along. Down to the consent agenda. I need a motion to approve the consent agenda with the amendments for the personnel report.
So moved.
Second. Braden,
Aye.
LaCroy,
Aye.
Strack,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Weedman.
Aye. All right, next down to the action items. First item is a motion to approve the fiscal year 2021 school calendar and waiving legal holidays as required under the Public Act 96-0640. We're waiving Veterans Day, President Lincoln's birthday, Casimir Pulaski Day, and in order to hold school.
So moved?
Second.
Any questions on that?
One about, out of curiosity, how come 46 and 127, the start and end times don't coincide? I had a question.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and I would say that not too long ago, the belief would be they can't possibly coincide. The high school has, I think, here and in many places, typically started much earlier than the elementary. However, a review of what's happening next year shows that we're just, I think it's a day off, you know, as in a day apart. So that would be something we could consider in the future, having them align. I think one of the things we need to be aware of, though, is that the high school has a number of districts that feed into it, right? So it is typical in a community, the high school kind of makes their own decision, right? They're not going to check with the elementaries. So if we made a decision that we were always going to align with the high school, it would mean that we are choosing to lose control ourselves of our start and end dates. You know, I think the board would want to consider if that was, you know, control we wanted to give up. But we're pretty close this year.
There was a movement about, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, maybe a little bit longer, where the high school districts started moving up their start date, which meant they got out earlier, which gave their kids a jump on the summer school jobs, is what some of that was part of, and then being able to get ready for college. So a couple of the school districts really kind of started ramping back their end date. That was part of that too. And we just, I don't think the elementary schools, it didn't matter, so we didn't really try.
I have another thought for future, not for this year, but I'm wondering if the equity committee might work on, you know what I'm about to say? Chicago Public Schools went to Indigenous Peoples Day, so it might be something for us to look into. Could we do that? Should we do that? Maybe for next year?
And some school districts are changing it from Columbus Day to Columbus/Indigenous Peoples Day
Yeah.
to honor
Yeah.
tradition, but also a new way of looking at it. So
Yeah.
those are things to consider.
Yeah, and there's other districts we could look into to see what was their decision process and why did they do it and that kind of thing. So just a thought.
Any other questions?
Weedman,
Aye.
Miller. Aye. Braden,
Aye.
LaCroy,
Aye.
Strack.
Aye.
Next is a second look and approval of the board policies that we worked on last board meeting. I think there was only a couple that we had discussion on, right? Okay, so of these, the consideration is the, on 7:270 was the consideration about the, about whether the district should purchase and store undesignated glucagon. And then 8:30 was the consideration is whether this policy should apply to the Board of Education meetings. So 8:30 is visitors to conduct, and conduct for the school property. Those were the two that we had some discussion on the last time. So if there is no other discussion, I'll look for a motion to approve.
I think, am I correct, Sue, that those are both ones that the board has to make a decision on? 'Cause
Right,
it's
we're
a-
gonna go to the default, or they
Yeah.
have to go with their own.
We actually have to decide.
Okay,
Yeah,
real quick.
here's the visitors one.
Sure. Gotta take my glasses off to read it.
I'm only so responsible.
A required question for the 8:30 was for the ease of administration. I'm trying to get to it here. Was deciding on if the board meetings qualified as a school event. Right up- So that's kind of the crux of it. So this issue involves a balancing of the board's interests in the orderly transaction of its public business and the efficiency of its meetings against an individual's statutory rights to attend meetings and/or comment to ask questions of the board.
Do I remember correctly that the layman's term question was that, was whether or not we were going to require the same level of decorum at a board meeting as we would for people visiting other,
Going to a sporting event
Sporting events,
or
exactly.
inside the building.
yeah, that was the question, whether a board meeting would be considered a school event. And therefore, people would be held to a high level of decorum. Like these fine people sitting out there right now.
They can't swear at us, we can't swear at them.
Yeah.
I apologize, because I don't remember the discussion on this from last time. I remember that
Mhm.
is there right now anything set, and this would heighten that level of conduct, that code of conduct? Or is right now it's just, there's no guidance around it?
No, the only guidance we have is what we kind of give at the front of our public comments.
Yeah, or this
When we
language.
ask for any comment.
Yeah.
That's really the only thing. I think this stems from, if I read the bottom of it real quickly, was somebody brought a toy gun into the meeting and, you know, did whatever he did during the meeting, and then they banned him or whatever it was, and he was fighting it. So I think that stems from that. So being able to use that as a level of conduct that is expected.
I mean, there isn't anything on this list that I think we should be doing in board meeting.
Exactly. And I want to add the language, actually what it says is, on those occasions when large groups of parents or guardians, friends, and/or community members are invited onto school property, okay, so here's the addition, or when community members are attending board meetings, that's the addition, that's new, all right? Visitors are not required to sign in, but must follow school officials' instructions. That's really the only thing that much to do about,
Nothing.
not much.
I mean, it doesn't preclude us from imposing other restrictions at board meetings,
No.
so. Because there are other policies and laws that
Correct.
we have to follow about that anyway, so.
Yep.
Yeah, that's good.
Or do we want to add that in?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, okay. Does that answer your question?
Okay.
And then the other one is about having unstored or undesignated glucagon for those that might be having a diabetic reaction.
Remind me, was it $2,000? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, I thought we did the math and we thought it was maybe 1,800.
Right.
And that was if we had it at all the schools, and I think we said at this time, we have, we don't even have diabetics at all of the schools.
Right. I did a little reading about diabetes and wondered if it's possible to, how else would we use that money to prevent kids from having any kind of need for medication? And specifically, I was thinking, is that money that would have a greater impact if we spent it on the food on Arbor, if we moved money towards Arbor, the signage that we had talked about in the past? or if it makes sense to have.
The part that I would say would make sense to have glucagon in the buildings, especially where we have kids that do have diabetes, would be for those that may not be able to afford to have the medicine both at home and at school. By having an undesignated one that you could give to another, that you could give to them in the case of emergency. Now, as I explained before, you know, my experiences around here is your EMS services are pretty rapid as it is. It's probably meant more for the rural areas where you have a 20-minute ETA for an ambulance to show up. You don't have to go too far from here to get that. And we have much better medication than glucagon in the ambulance. So to have one or two or one undesignated one in each building isn't going to be too prohibitive, I don't think. 'Cause I think they were $200 or $300 a piece. So 7 buildings, $1,400, just to have them, right, just to have that ability inside the building to be able to distribute. I don't see the need to have more than one, because you typically would use it and then go out and get a new one. So to have more than one in a building, the chances of you having 2 diabetics that are going to need not at the same time are probably slim to none.
Wait, so if the numbers of kids increase? by any amount?
Still, I think the chances of you having more than one diabetic reaction at a time in any one building would still be very slim.
And one that gets to that level.
Right. And one that gets to that level where you have to give it.
That's the great thing.
So to me, you know, I would say the max we would put in building, each building would be 1. But
If that.
yeah, it depends on what you have as far as a population that needs it too.
Are we always aware of our population needs?
And any family that has a child who's diabetic will inform the nurse. We have meetings, they have a plan at school, so yes. Yeah. But keep in mind, this is also undesignated, so that if, for example, we had a new student at school and we were unaware, we would have it there.
In the past 10 years, we've not needed one.
No.
So the question is whether or not to, do we have, is there another one of the questions there that we have to answer?
This is whether or not we're going to store the.
Supply it or no.
I think we might as well.
I don't see the downside.
Yeah, better safe than sorry.
Yeah, if it saves one person's life, the $1,400 is well worth it. So we're good with supplying them or providing them in the buildings? That probably increases your training too.
Oh, yeah.
Some sort of training for
Could
the
be.
nurses. Do we have a motion already? I'll make the motion to approve.
Second?
LaCroy,
Aye.
Braden,
Aye.
Strack,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Weedman.
Aye. Okay, so next is a motion to approve the 2020-2021 contracts for the business office. One is for an interim director of finance, CSPO, and that is Mary Worling. And the other one is for a director of finance, and it's Jane Lair McCown.
And I would love to talk about them,
Okay.
if I might. Okay, so as I've already shared with the board, we have been searching this year for our new director of finance for next year. We have gone pretty far deep into that search and have not found the right person to lead us for a length of time in the future. And therefore, it is my recommendation that we bring aboard 2 interim directors of finance, Jane Lair McGowan and Mary Worling. They're both retired school business leaders Between the two of them, they have, I think it's over 35 years of experience in school finance leadership. Yeah, I did the math. Pre-retirement, including Lake Bluff District 65, Bell Chatham District 5, Palatine District 15, Glenview District 34, and Wheeling District 21, along with some other districts. But those are some of the places these two retired school business leaders have worked and led other school districts into strong financial positions. Mary is already a familiar face in the district and already a familiar face at the board meeting, actually. She's been stepping in to work on various projects in our school district this past fall and winter, and she'll continue to lead us with some projects in the spring, including leadership of, kind of co-leadership with me of our our insurance, our insurance advisory committee, and I've also asked her to be in charge of creating our budget for the 2021 school year. That will really help us to, should you approve their contracts, that would really help us in providing some consistency moving forward, some transition. Jane would be starting in June, actually, so we put before you a June to end of May contract, which is a little bit unusual, but we wanted to do that so that she too could step in before this fiscal year ends so that she would have some transition opportunities, and then with the potential of her tagging on a few additional days next June if so needed, as we are transitioning a new CSBO in the future. And I'll note that we've already had some conversations about how we would be splitting their work because, as you know, they are retired people, so they have limits on the amount of work they can do for us. So neither of them would be working full-time. The work would be shared, and I have committed to our school community that we will clarify for everyone who's doing what. Nobody's going to have to wonder, who do I ask to get what kind of question answered. So that's my information about those two wonderful, strong leaders.
Any questions? Any motion to approve both contracts?
Second.
Strack,
Aye?
Braden,
Aye.
LaCroy,
Aye.
Miller, aye, Weedman.
Aye. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Really glad you're here. Yes, I agree. You can clap. Clap.
Excuse me.
Christy wants to know where the cake is.
Yeah.
Always have cake. I don't know, maybe we need another executive secretary.
That's a missed opportunity. Right there.
All right. So next is unfinished business. An update on the evidence-based funding.
Yeah, I have a little information for
Okay.
you. Jim had asked, I think it was at our last meeting, for an update in terms of what we did with those funds that we received in the fall. So here's the information that I have for you at this time. We looked very carefully at the elements that the state puts out in terms of the intent of those funds. And so we were able to add some staff that was really needed. Early childhood staff in the middle of the year, as our numbers of early childhood students that we were supporting grew. We added some time for an OT, an occupational therapist. We also allocated funds to hire a new RN, though in all honesty, we have not been able to hire a new RN just because that person has not stepped forth. We haven't found anybody for that position, but we did allocate funds to that. As well, we included a curricular subscription that we needed to pay for, and that was brought forth to the board, so you all saw that and approved that. Also, as I think our board is well aware, we had budgeted a certain amount for the raises as a part of our bargain this fall, and the final result of the bargain exceeded what had been budgeted for. And so some of those funds, a lot of the funds, actually did go towards that. We're still in discussion whether we have the room to make any more purchases or bring aboard future staff that follow those, the EBM fund elements, and we're still talking about that. At this point, Mary and John are working together on this year's budget. They recognize that there are areas where we've already exceeded the budget that was planned, particularly based on those raises that we talked about, but in other areas as well, potentially. They will likely be bringing forth a budget amendment late in the spring, but between now and that budget amendment, we may be having more information to share about other purchases related to those funds. Right now, we don't know because we need to carefully consider where we are right now with this year's budget. Any questions about that?
Can I add an EdRed update about EBF? I will now add, how about that? So I think I mentioned at the last meeting that in the governor's budget, he is basically, if the fair tax is not passed in the 2020 election, he's holding $150 million of the EBF dollars in the case that that does not pass. Now, I don't know what that ends up doing or if it actually ends up happening, but EdRed is keeping an eye on that, and so I think we should just know that that's out there for future. And clearly EdRed's involved. You know, their questions are around how, like, will the hold harmless provisions of the law hold true, and how money will be appropriated? Will they hold to the tiering process that they laid out, should they not be fully funded? So they're making sure that you know, stays, or that actually happens. But there is a place to give feedback to EdRed to answer this question, which I don't know if the two of you might even have some thought about, you know, the input to this. But what they're asking their members is, given the governor's budget address that proposed $150 million cut to EBF if the progressive tax is not adopted this fall, how has that cut impacted your district's ability to plan for next school year? So just something that they are collecting information on. There's a place that we can go to the EdRed page to give input to that, and I think that might be something we start to talk about and make sure that we quantify that and are in conversation with EdRed so they can represent us on this question going forward.
So is the money holding back and, or planning to hold back, in addition to the current funds that he's already in the bill? Like,
Yes.
Yes.
So here's the base that we're
Yes.
already at for this year, and he's proposing another 350
Yes.
billion or million,
That's
but he's
correct.
gonna hold back 150 of it.
Yes.
So
Yep.
in theory, we still should be getting the same back, maybe a little bit more depending on how much more they put into it.
That's right.
Mary,
Yeah.
if you wanna
And
chime
the-
in,
What
please
tier
do.
we end up in?
Well, and the 150, it's not that it's being cut, it's that he's not committing to spending it
Right.
until he's assured to have the funds through the new
Right.
tax law.
Yes. Mary,
So
you
it's
had something to share.
Yes, I wanted to highlight or take a minute to talk about the budget process. And it is a political process. When we think about the state appropriations for education, it begins with the proposed budget from the Illinois State Board of Education. Then the governor proposes his budget. And then the state legislature considers and will finally make that decision on the final budget. And technically, they're to take action by May 31st. So it's every year a bit of an evolution between what the Illinois State Board of Education proposes for budget, what the governor proposes for budget, and what the final legislated outcome is come May 31st. So the opportunity here is for those who are concerned about the governor's budget, just as EdRed has suggested, that we reach out and have conversations with those who can advocate for us, such as EdRed, as well as reaching out to our own legislators and speaking to them about our concerns for this holdback. There is the holdback on the EBF money as well as mandated categoricals. So your transportation claim reimbursement, there's $50 million also in reserve per the governor's proposed budget as well. So it's the 150 in EBF as well as the 50 in mandated categoricals. So this is a great time for us to reach out to those who represent us in Springfield and explain to them what it means to us. And I would consider, as a school district, that we may very well be having conversations about contingency plans. So if the legislature were to approve a budget equal to what the governor has proposed with the various holdbacks, we would probably be talking about budgeting conservatively and then making decisions about what if in November the tax structure is supported and then those monies in reserve are then released. What do we do then? So that creates challenges for school districts, obviously, as it relates to staffing and other initiatives which are difficult to address in a mid-year situation. Does that help?
Mhm. I got a quick question for you. Does Ed-Red work on the federal level too?
There is
Well,
FedRed.
there's FedRed, yeah.
We haven't gone there yet.
Fred? Well, let's call it Fred.
Because there's been a lot of talk at the federal level too about cutting
Absolutely.
education programs or education dollars. Okay, any other questions on the EBF funds? Since we got off topic a little bit there. No? Okay. Next is new business. So the first is the discussion on the garbage bid, which I assume Keith will be, nope,
It's gonna be Mary.
oh, it's gonna be Mary. I figured it was gonna be Keith, he's talking in the past.
Yes, I'm happy to present for discussion the waste removal and recycling services bid recommendation. In conformance with Board Policy 460, Purchasing and Contracts, and the Illinois Procurement Code, the business office solicited bids for waste removal and recycling services for essentially the next 3 years. And we were very pleased to receive 3 bids. They are noted in the board document in that summary there. The low bid was provided by Waste Management of Illinois, who is our current provider, and we have a long-term relationship with Waste Management, and services from Waste Management have satisfied our needs and so on and so forth. This bid summary, the bid submitted to us by Waste Management does reflect some cost increases. Those cost increases are related to staffing and the outcome of their collective bargaining process for their employees, as well as the cost of recycling. And that's something you've probably heard about in other places as well, where there's been a pattern for shipping recyclable materials to other countries, including China. And recently, countries like China have begun to reject recyclable materials from the United States because they're not clean enough. And so our waste haulers have had to find other outlets for these recyclable materials, and therefore there are additional shipping expenses, and these outlets are more costly than they have been in the past. And so those are the 2 drivers to these increases. In the first year of the contract, it essentially represents a 3% increase, and then years 2 and 3, it's a 5% increase from Waste Management. Are there any questions from the board?
I have one about food composting, and if you don't know, that's fine. Does it include an option for food composting? Is that an option for us or not?
I don't, no, it's not an option. And that's been a key challenge with the recycling, is the contaminated recycling, which relates to food products. And so we solicited bids strictly for waste hauling and recycling. We didn't incorporate a component for composting.
Any other questions? So good to move that on to action item next month. All right, we're up to topics for future agenda.
I'm going to bring you staffing next time. The bid. Bid.
Any other topics anybody wants to discuss coming up? Yeah,
A date
so
for that?
I figured that would come after the school year was over.
Yeah.
Gave them a year and a half worth of data to look at, so I figured we probably won't see that until this.
Yes.
Coming next week?
Yeah, yep, CEDO's coming, they will lead off, they'll do a presentation at the beginning.
So if you have any questions for them, make sure you give them to Lynn ahead of time, so they can be prepared. All right. Sounds like enough. Okay. Any more public comments? Anybody from the audience like to say anything? I see a bunch of people going, so you're not getting me up there.
Saying, thank you for having a short meeting, so we can go home.
We have a closed session? All right, so we will have a brief closed session, so I need a motion to adjourn into a closed session.
So moved?
Second.
LaCroy,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Strack,
Aye.
Weedman,
Aye.
Braden.
Aye.